See so many of you. Thank you so much for giving up your evening, especially to talk about something as exciting as audits. I know that your heart's going to sing at the very thought of the word, but hopefully by the end of tonight you'll be a little bit more confident with the church audit. Yeah, just hopefully some of those questions that might be spinning around your head we might have been able to answer. So this session today has come up as a result of our last Church and Circuit Safeguarding Forum, and there were a lot of questions that people were asking about the audit. So I know that audits are going to be familiar to many of you if you've had a working role which involves some sort of action plan and audit. We see them as a useful tool to standardise practice and to help us to make progress in a specific area. So ideally, an audit should be a document that you complete yearly and you keep referring back to. And we're looking to embed a positive safeguarding culture across our churches and within our district. And this positive safeguarding culture, it stems from, I'm sure you'll all remember the Marcus Eruga video, which is part of the advanced module training. And this video talks about perpetrators being less likely to choose to abuse where a positive safeguarding culture exists. We haven't got time to show you that video today, but I wanted to draw your attention to the idea that a safeguarding culture is a way of preventing abuse. Any of the links, any of the things we mentioned today, sorry, my cat's decided to walk across the screen. Any of those links that we mentioned today, Rosie's going to make sure that they're available to you at the end or on our website, so you've got them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. So we've got the church audit up for you to have a look at. So this is the audit. If you go to our website, this is the audit that you would download from our website. And we would ideally want you to review this audit annually. A good way to do this, we think, is to have a look at it a month before your church council will be due to meet. And at the same time as you're reviewing your safeguarding policy. So for a lot of churches, this is around September time. And then we thought that you could present your findings from the audit, and then most importantly, what your next steps are going to be at your church council meeting. And I know that safeguarding is on the agenda of every church council meeting. So this audit can form the basis of your report. It will give you lots of great things to talk about. And it will help you to report on the progress you've made over the year, and you can share it at that meeting. And you might have had a look already at the church audit and know that there's about 30 points that we're going to be considering. A lot of these are a yes or a no answer, so they're really easy and quick to check off. And I don't think that completing this audit is a challenge, but the challenge is how you action what comes up as a gap. And then more importantly, how you get the rest of your church on board with the audit. I know some churches struggle when it comes to safeguarding, and I know some churches might be a little bit resistant when told that they've got more things that they've got to consider and things they've got to do. So if you do hit a bit of resistance, we would recommend you speaking to your church leadership team about planning in God Welcomes All, which is the theology of safeguarding. But it's a really good resource for home groups. It's a 4-session resource, and it's about how safeguarding is embedded through scripture, really. So what we're going to do today together, if you don't mind, is we're going to whiz through the 33 points on the audit. We're going to consider how to address any gaps, and we're aware that this is going to throw up all sorts of questions for you. And if that does happen, please type them in the chat. Something I did want to mention is that this audit is specific to the Nottingham and Derby district. Different districts will have created their own audits. So this is one that is for our district. So it's, if you're joining from another district, if you're watching this video from another district, just be aware of that. A lot of the things will be the same, but this is specific to our district. I will hopefully not take too long. So point number 1, does the church have a safeguarding policy? Our district has used the connectional safeguarding policy, and there's 7 pages of that. And we've also worked really hard. The DSG has done a fantastic job of creating an additional A to Z of safeguarding, which is attached to the end of the safeguarding policy. It's only the first 7 pages that you have to present to your church councils or your church leadership team. So they only have to agree those first 7 pages. So point number 2, does the church have a safeguarding officer who isn't the minister? We know that some churches do struggle to recruit safeguarding officers, but it's really crucial that you have somebody to talk to for safeguarding. And if you are struggling within your church, we know that there are some churches that have formed coalitions, so where the responsibility is shared between more than one church, but they've got one safeguarding officer. If you are struggling, then have a chat with your circuit safeguarding officer. They might be able to provide some sort of solution for you, but we do know it's difficult. Point number 3, is the safeguarding policy reviewed annually by the church council with copies distributed prior to the meeting? So our A to Z makes our safeguarding policy quite a chunky document. So you only need to share those first 7 pages, and it's worth doing that by email, I would say, so that they're aware of what the policy is, and it does need to be agreed on by the church council each year. So on to point number 4. Are the 2 safeguarding posters provided by the connection displayed on church premises for all users to see? The great thing about how Rosie's put this document together is if it asks you, have you got this? Have you given them this document? She's put links all the way through. So hopefully this means that you can just click on that link, download it and print them off. So the posters that this is talking about is who to contact should any concerns be raised, because we want my details to be in every church so that if things do happen, they know who to contact. Something that will need to be you need to be made aware of is that my contact details are going to change in September, because I'm going to be employed by the connection. My phone number will stay the same, but I will have a connectional email address. So those posters will need to be updated when in September, when I get those new details. I will be keeping my email address for a time for a transfer, just so other people have got it, so I don't miss anything, but it will need to be updated. Point 5, are posters or leaflets available for users of the church seeking help? Like we've got helpline numbers, Childline, Silverline. A good pointer here is that you might be aware of local groups to your church or charities that would be useful to display on your safeguarding board. There's also domestic abuse numbers to call, and there were some resources produced by the Connection a few years ago, stickers that you can stick around your church. I think Rosie mentioned that she has a lot of these stickers hanging around in the district hub. So if you would like some, she is the person to get in touch with, and I'm sure she'll be able to sticker you, as it were. So yes, are those posters and leaflets available, and do you have local ones recommended as well? Number 6, are connectional survivor resources available at the church? So we see survivor awareness and trauma-informed practice as key to improving our safeguarding culture. The resources that are mentioned in point 6 are produced by the Survivors Advisory Group, who are really active within our connection, and we're really lucky to have them. And we're hoping that we might be able to get a representative of the Survivor Group to run one of our spotlight sessions in the near future, if they're available to do that. There's also been some leaflets produced recently around touch, and they're the May I resources, which we did share in the most recent newsletter that we sent out. But those will be added to this document. Those links will be added to this document, so you've got them too. But they're around trauma-informed practice and thinking about the experience of abuse survivors around touch within our church. So moving on to point number 7, Does the church safeguarding officer inform the circuit safeguarding officer when people new to posts require safeguarding training and keep up-to-date records? This one's really crucial if you're in a large church, because you will have lots of different roles within a large church that you might not be fully aware of. It's sometimes a bit easier within a smaller churches. But is there a process where if a new role is created, that you know that is happening? So then you can think around the safer recruitment of that role. So that's what that question is really asking. For point number 8, does the church or circuit safeguarder officer hold secure records of all people in roles working with children or vulnerable adults, DBS records and safeguarding training records, and remind people that they need to renew them? So this might work differently depending on your circuit. So it might be that your circuit administrator holds the records. But the main question is, are those records kept? Do you have a record of who needs to do training and when they need to renew it? And are they shared to inform how many future sessions we might need to lead as a circuit or as a district? So if you need people who need foundation module training, does your circuit admin know? So we know when to put them on and how many sessions. And also that people are contacted when their training or their DBS is lapsed. So having a record's really crucial, and that's a conversation it's probably best to have with your circuit administrator and circuit safeguarding officer to find out how those records are being kept. Okay, so I'll move on to number 9. Have all people without a DBS who require one been informed of the application process and helped to apply? I know that DBS checks are things that everybody loves and enjoys, but they are absolutely vital for our work. And it's important that whoever's completing the DBS check, now often that happens at circuit level, but they ask the applicant to fill out the self-declaration form. What that form is it means that if there's a blemish on the DBS, if somebody knows that they've got a past conviction that might come up, and they do that self-declaration, it makes it so much easier for us to know to expect that, and it makes the process happen a lot more quickly. So the link to the self-declaration form will be added into this document for you, so you've got it. So number 10 and 11 and 12 and 13, I'm not going to read them all out because it's all about numbers for training. So this is in here, how many people have had foundation safeguarding training, how many people need it, how many people have had advanced, how many people need it. It's a quick way of checking any discrepancies year on year. Having the number of people who have attended the training is a really good way of you checking year on year. Oh, there were fewer people this year that needed training. So does that mean I need to chase that next year because it might have expired? It's just a way of encouraging you to check your records. And then passing on that need for training to your circuit administrator, so we know what training to put on. Number 14, have people who have not engaged with safeguarding training been asked to step down? It is a requirement for our roles that people have the expected safeguarding training for that role, so whether it's foundation or advanced module. And often we get the question, well, I'm a teacher or I'm a I work with the police. Why do I need to do safeguarding training for the church? It is a requirement for people to do the Methodist Church safeguarding training, because as we all know, the church is a unique context where we have different groups meeting, and it is really important that we make sure that the correct training is done. And if people aren't willing to engage with it, then their ability or suitability for the role is considered. Point 15, does the church have a risk assessment for each activity involving children, young people and or vulnerable adults that takes place on church premises and church trips and visits away from the church premises? Now, the good news is that it's not your job to complete those risk assessments as church safeguarding officer. unless that's been agreed by your church council that they would like that in your role description. It's just your job to ensure that they're in place. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel either. So if you've got a church local to you that runs a toddler group or something similar to what you're running, why don't you speak to them about their risk assessment and sharing their risk assessment? And your circuit safeguarding officer is always a good person to talk to about that. Rosie and I have been looking at example risk assessments as well and wondering whether there's the option of sharing some of those so that we've got a pro forma for you to have a look at if that would be helpful. We're on to number 16. I'll scroll down. So have copies of each activity risk assessment being sent to the church and/or circuit safeguarding officer. So that's quite self-explanatory, that one. Have they been completed and have you got them? Number 17. This is a good one. Do all leaders organising church trips know that they need to send a copy of their trip risk assessment to the church and/or circuit safeguarding officer at least 1 week before the trip for approval? Well, hopefully by sharing this audit at your church council meeting, they will now know that because you will have let them know that that is something that they've got to do. So it's just good practice for them to know that. Number 18. How many church trips or residentials have taken place in the last connectional year? And number 18 is a great way of checking number 17 because you can count up how many have happened and how many have you got the risk assessments for. And then number 19 are all your activity risk assessments. So the ones for your toddler groups or coffee mornings or whatever activities it is that you're doing on church premises, are they reviewed annually? And hopefully the answer will be yes. Okay, so we're on to number 20, which is safer recruitment. And I think this is the area that tends to throw up the most gaps in any church audit. So it's a really big responsibility for church safeguarding officers, and it's something that we really want to be able to support you with because we know that it's a huge area. So what we were wondering was whether or not having a spotlight session like this one we're having tonight on specifically on safer recruitment would be something that you'd like another spotlight session on. So if you would, do you want to just put a yes or a thumbs up or something in the chat, because that would be really helpful for us to know. We are planning, hopefully by the end of this month, what our next spotlight sessions will be on. So if safer recruitment would be a useful one, it would be good to know. Okay, so for number 20, does the church use the mandatory safer recruitment 12-step procedures and forms A, parts 1 and 2 for volunteers, workers with regular activities involving children, young people or vulnerable adults? Hopefully that answer is going to be yes, and the forms are there with a link. And then has the church written a role description? Was the person interviewed? Has the church taken up references? And do they have line management? All of those points are in the 12 steps. So if you've answered, yes, we are completing the 12 steps, all of the answers to those questions will be a yes. And as part of that, number 21 goes a bit more into detail of role descriptions. Have role outlines been provided for every role in the church? And have people been safely recruited, including interview and references to these roles? And this is a difficult one because, as we know in our churches, so many of the roles that people fulfill are long-standing roles. They're ones that people have had for a really long time. And even if that's the case, they need a role description. So a good way to start to do this is to approach them and to say, oh, I've noticed you've been a pastoral visitor for a really long time. What is it that you do as a pastoral visitor? Asking them what their role entails, and then use that to create your role descriptions. We have got a pack of role descriptions available in the Safeguarding Hub of our district website. So there's lots of role descriptions there that you can download and edit to fit your own roles and what's going on within your churches. Number 22, how many people have started working have started working with adults? How many people working with children or vulnerable adults have started roles in the last year to September 2025? So that's just another question where you're counting up about your new recruited roles, and then it's a good way of them being able to check and have they all got role descriptions in place. Number 23, have all church council members and people with roles within the church sign the relevant confidential safeguarding declaration? There's a link to that again, so you've got it there. And if you're unsure whether this has happened, when you present this audit at your church council, a good thing to do is to take a few copies of that safeguarding declaration, and then they can sign it there and then you know that that's been done. Number 24, where a church has activities for children or vulnerable adults, have all church council members undertaken an enhanced DBS check for either child or adult workforce or both? So in a small church, I think the number is less than 50, fewer than 50 people. Anybody can sit on the church council. So that does mean that everybody who does sit on church council would have to have an enhanced DBS check. Now, this isn't a requirement that comes from the Methodist Church. This is a requirement that comes from the Charity Commission, and it's a legal requirement. So it's not one that we can just say, oh, we can't possibly DBS check all of those people. We have to do it legally. If they are sitting on church council, it has to be done. And I can appreciate that that would be quite a big job. But it's also really important because they become charity trustees. Number 25, it's the key holders. Have all key holders signed Form D, the key holder declaration? And again, the link's there for you. This is another area. It's not your responsibility to chase everybody who might be a key holder. I would pass this on to your steward team, but it's making sure that you have knowledge of who has got keys. And that goes into number 26. Have church keys been collected from people once they no longer require a key for their role? We were talking about this before with older churches. You might not be aware who's got keys. It's so often the case. But it's looking at, if that is the case, what system are you going to put in place going forward to make sure that you've got safer working practices around key holders? Look, we're whizzing through all of these 33. We're doing very well. We're on number 27 already. Does the church use room booking forms when outside organisations hire church premises? And then number 28, are all users of the premises given a copy of the church safeguarding policies? Again, this is going to not be something that you need to do, but something that you need to pass on to whoever handles the bookings for your church. Whoever organises your lettings, if you let them know that they've got to automatically share a copy of the church safeguarding policy with whoever hires the buildings, then that's your job done on those two. So number 29, it's in red because we've added this one in because we realise that there's often confusion when we hire out our church premises. There's often confusion about whose safeguarding policy is being followed. And we've had this a few times where people are providing a regulated activity within church premises and they assume that they're using church policy, and actually that hasn't been agreed. So if someone is providing a regulated activity in your church premises, have they got their own safeguarding policy? Have you used the checklist provided by the district just to assure that it's compliant with what we would be expecting for regulated activity? It's just a way of covering yourself to make sure that everybody using our buildings is using them safely. And that link is on our website to that checklist. Number 30, has Church Council had this audit presented to them and agreed its responses? So you might want to save time, because going through this in minute detail at a Church Council meeting is going to take time. You might want to share a copy of this audit before your Church Council meets. So you can say, I've completed this delightful 33-point audit, these are the things that I've identified as things that we are doing really well, and these are areas where we've got gaps. And then your report can identify the things you're doing well and your areas for development and what you'll be doing next. So that way, you haven't got to go through all of it because they'll have read it all before, and you can give them the highlights in your report. Number 31, have all worship leaders been safely recruited and attended Safeguarding Foundation and Advanced Module training? So the worship leader role often looks different depending on which church you're in. And it's worth having a look at the role description on the website for the worship leader role, and then having a look at whether or not they need that safeguarding, what level of training they need depending on that role description. But in the connectional safeguarding policy, worship leaders have to have advanced module training, which often comes as a surprise to some people. Number 32, are notes kept of all safeguarding concerns known to the Church Safeguarding Officer or Minister in a secure place, either online or in a locked filing system? It's up to you how you keep those records. The important thing as well is that there is a system for those records being passed on, so if you stop being Church Safeguarding Officer, are those then lost? Are those records lost, or is there a way for them to be passed on to whoever takes on the role next? Final one, we're nearly there. Have all safeguarding concerns been referred to the DSO? So our district runs a little bit differently to other districts. We would encourage all safeguarding concerns to come to me. Other districts might say that they would come to the church or circuit safeguarding officer first, but we run a little bit differently. You might want to discuss a concern with your minister first, and that's absolutely fine. But we really feel that church and circuit safeguarding officers have got a lot to do with safer recruitment and organising training and so many other things that are going on in their churches. And we're really fortunate that I've got full-time hours for our district, and I'm really available. So please do reach out to me first with any concerns, anything you're worried about. And it's best to do it that way. So hopefully this has raised your awareness of what we're looking for in our church audit. The first thing I want to say is don't panic. There is a lot on there, I know, but they are yes or no questions, aren't they? A lot of them, or putting in numbers. So hopefully quite straightforward. Don't panic. There's a lot, and we don't expect any church to be in a position where every one of these points is completed, because the purpose of an audit is to identify what you're doing well and what your next steps need to be. Let's put it into a time frame. So you've sat down and you've spent your time and you've filled in those 33 boxes, and you've got a few weeks to go before your church council meeting. And you've now got a really good idea of what's going really well in terms of safeguarding with your church and what you need to work on. So the important thing is to hold those things in equal measure. Hold in equal measure what you're doing well and what your next steps are. So what do you do next? And I've broken it down into 4, hopefully easy steps. So number 1, there will be areas of safeguarding in your church which are running smoothly. Make a note of these to share with your church council. So don't bombard them with all the things you've got to do. Make sure you share the things that are going really well and that you've noticed that you're doing well. And then number 2, you've got some non-negotiables that you've got to put in place. The non-negotiables are steps 1 to 4 on your audit. You've got a safeguarding policy, you've got a safeguarding officer, you've got posters, and those contact details of who to contact with a concern are displayed. Those are the main points that you've got to have in place. So your next job, number 3, is to prioritise your action points. So for a lot of our churches, we are anticipating that this is going to be around safer recruitment. This is an area we get lots of questions, and it's often at the heart of a lot of the safeguarding concerns that do come into me. So prioritising the areas you need to develop and create a plan for how you're going to action each one. So a gap you've identified, for example, might be that you've got long-standing roles that don't have role descriptions. So what's your action going to be? I'll download the role description pack from the district website and make this an area to discuss at church council. Or the gap is, I'm not sure whether DBS checks are up to date. What's your action going to be? I'll speak to the circuit safeguarding officer or circuit admin. I'll email a request for DBS details for those you're unsure about. And then I'll create a spreadsheet or a way of recording how whether the DBS checks are up to date. So looking at what your gaps are and small things that you can do to action those gaps. I always find it quite useful to create an action plan, which areas to develop, what I'll do, and when I'll do it. And it would be good practice to present that at your church council meeting. As part of point 3 of creating that action plan and those priorities, remember to pace yourself. The audit's designed to be a tool that you use regularly. It's not a snapshot that you do in September and then never touch again. Many churches will have more than one church council meeting and leadership meetings interspersed over the course of the year. And you can use these meetings as opportunities to raise awareness over time, rather than overwhelming people with loads of things that they've got to work on. And point number 4, reach out for help if you need it. It can be quite a lonely role being church safeguarding officer, but you have got people around you. You can see from all the faces on this screen that safeguarding is really valued across our district. You've got your minister who can support you, fellow church safeguarding officers or your circuit safeguarding officer. And if you're really unsure, you can speak to either of us Rosies. We're always here and happy to help. And I'd much rather that you picked up the phone or dropped me an email rather than struggled or worried about what you've got to do. I know that there can be resistance in churches to promoting safeguarding, and that you might be feeling the pressure of this audit and discussing it with your church council. But I wanted to reassure you the responsibility for completing, for implementing your safeguarding policy is the responsibility of your church council. It's not solely your responsibility. It's legally the responsibility of the charity trustees. So depending on how your circuit is set up, that could be your church council or your circuit meeting. You might be nominated for safeguarding. You might be the representative for safeguarding, but it's everybody's responsibility. It's not just you on your own. So if you do feel that you haven't got people on side, that is something that you can say, that it is something that it is the legal responsibility of the charity trustees to implement the safeguarding policies. So my final few bits of advice before we move on to our question park. I think important thing is to share what's going well. So when you present this to your church council, the district's given us a delightful 33-point audit to complete, and we're really strong on 25 of these points. Or when I looked into the audit, I realised just how much we're already doing. It's so often the case in churches. We overlook what we're doing well and we forget that there's so much that we're doing well, and we focus on the things that we've got to do. Be prepared when you go to church council with your audit. If you complete it in advance and share it in advance, then you go in and talk about your priority areas and how you action them. You've already done loads of the groundwork for your church council. You won't need to discuss it at length then. We can just discuss these are the things that we're going to work on and this is how we're going to do it. If you identify safeguarding as a thread that runs through everything that happens in church, you're going to get people on side really well. So you might say, reading this risk assessment's really helped me to notice where small changes could be made, but there's so much that's already going well. We have an open invitation across our district for people to take part in foundation module training. It's not a requirement for you to be in a role to take part in that training. So make sure that you invite as many people as you can to attend foundation module training, because that's really going to raise awareness of people about the importance of safeguarding and where it sits within our church. And finally, take bite-sized chunks. How do you eat a big pudding? One spoon at a time. And we're aware that you're all volunteers and you've got multiple puddings or pies that you're involved in and working towards. So if you look at the audit as an ongoing process that you report at each meeting and you've made small steps each time, you're looking towards progress towards safer working practice rather than a 1 year snapshot where you see how well you're doing. And at the end of the day, we don't want this audit to be completed and then just placed in a folder and nothing done with it. It's really about encouraging those safe spaces within our church. So by looking at small chunks over a few months, you'll be surprised at how much of a difference you can make. Whistle stop tour of audits, and I know I've said an awful lot in the last half an hour, so I'm really grateful to you all for listening. Have we got anything in the questions? So I've got, by worship leaders, do you mean those who have attended formal training? It depends on that one, because in some churches, the worship leaders are those who are responsible for leading the music side of things. It depends on how much they're leading within the service, really. So that's what you need to look at your role descriptions. But somebody who's leading that, who's taking responsibility within the service, would need that advanced module training for the worship leaders.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Rosie? I mean, there are obviously designated worship leaders who have done the training. Those are the ones who are approved and appointed by the church, local church council. They obviously need to have done the advanced module, but there will most probably be a number of other people who are regularly leading an aspect of worship that you would want to, make sure had done the advanced module training.
Are there any other questions on here that you can answer, Rosie, while I scan through? Because there'll be ones on safer recruitment that you'll be hot on.
We've got Fiona asked, I think it's Fiona asked, item 20, safer recruitment, is it just part 1 form now rather than part 2 as well? My understanding is yes, it is, but I would need to double check that, but I think it is just part 1. There's also a question on clarification needed on what constitutes regulated activity. I'll pass that one over to you, Rosie.
Okay, so the regulated activity is when you submit a DBS, that is you're providing regulated activity. So so the DBS is what the disclosure bar. I'm getting my words mixed up now.
Disclosure barring service.
Yeah, the disclosure barring service have the definition of what regulated activity is. And usually it's about the number of days that you're providing an activity. So I think it's more than 3 in 30 days. And it also depends on the type of activity it is. So for example, teaching, regardless of how many days you do it, would be a regulated activity. So for more information on that, the best place to look is the DBS website for what a regulated activity is, because then you'll be able to look at what specifically is happening within your churches and decide, is that regulated activity?
And then another question, so what happens when there are lots of no answers? I think my answer to that would be, as a church safeguarding officer myself, is that you tackle it a bit at a time and look at where the priorities are. And, kind of sometimes there's 1 or 2 things that you think, well, actually, that would be quick to change from a no to a yes, and others, it takes a bit longer.
Thank you, David, for your comment about identifying and sharing good practice, because that is exactly what it's about. And it really does support us by knowing what's going well in your churches. Are there any other questions that we've missed?
I don't think so. There was a question around how do people in churches know whether people have done the advanced module at district level. I did put the answer in the chat, but the answer to that is that I contact circuit safeguarding officers and circuit administrators, more regularly now. We used to do it sort of once every few months, but I tend to do it now as soon as somebody has completed the training and let them know so that they can update their circuit records. If it's somebody from another district, or you do the training, they do the training in another district, because the online can now be done sort of across the connection, the person themselves would need to let you know. So if you are aware of somebody who's attended the advanced module training, or even if you're not aware, you need to kind of say to people that if they've done it in a different district, so they've joined, I don't know, Yorkshire North and East, or they've joined the Sheffield district, they are then responsible for letting your circuit and you know when they've done the training, because I don't get that information.
Just if it helps people, as well as looking on the DDC, I use this safer recruitment policy that's on the Connectional website, because in there there's table 1.3 on page 18, which is a really good guide to help you decide if it's regulated or not. There's quite a few pages before that, but that's what helps me.
Thank you. So Heather said, as a small church, we have agreement that the people who serve on the leadership team would be the trustees and would need DBS for the charity commission. We are not a charity in our own right. Do you need to DBS everybody? I think if the agreement is that the leadership team are the trustees, then that's okay. It just depends on who sits on your church council.
We are a small church, Rosie, so everybody can sit on the church council. But because that would be, you know, kind of 90-year-olds, I'd kind of discussed that previously and had an agreement that it would be the leadership team. But you were saying everybody, so I'm thinking, oh, maybe I do need to, you know, maybe I need to go back and ask these 90-year-olds.
Only if they do sit on, only if they, do they attend the church council?
Yeah, most of them do, yeah, or they
do,
try to. Yeah. But I'm, you know, to DBS people who, you know, no passport, no driving license, probably no utility bills in their name, it can be quite tricky sometimes. But we had a discussion at the last church council meeting about whether we really needed to extend that to everybody.
Yeah, I think you have to really, if you're following it to the letter. I can go back and double check on it, but when I last looked into it, that was what was said. And as it is a requirement from the Charity Commission and not the Methodist Church, it's not, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at connectionally, really, about the legal, you know, because it's a legal requirement, but that is not fit for purpose in how a lot of church councils are running.
I think our circuit person was saying that they have to do a self-declaration, but not a DBS. Because there's a self-declaration, isn't there? That's not the DBS.
There is
check.
a self-declaration as well.
It's I know a lot of churches this will affect, but it is for those churches who do that work with children and vulnerable adults. So there may well be some churches, you know, mine is one of them at the moment, where we don't work with those groups.
How do you define vulnerable adults? There is no definition. Anyone over a certain age? What is a vulnerable adult?
Well, the definition would be that we all can be vulnerable at some times, but I think there's probably particular groups of people that it would be obvious for. So if you have a dementia cafe, or if you have you know, a singing for the brain, or whatever it is, again, I think it's conversations that we have to have between us, isn't it? And reach out if we're thinking, do I think this is a vulnerable group or not?
And the legal term is adults at risk, which is different to the Methodist definition of vulnerable adults. So that will have an impact as well on that. What we perceive vulnerable adults to be will be different to what DBS or the Charity Commission will see them as adults at risk.
A question. So the self-declaration form, is it the one that we used to call CSD4? Is that the one that we need to ask the church council to sign?
I think
I
all
can't-
3 forms have now gone into voluntary application form A. So the CSD
Yeah.
one and form 1, form A and form B, or whatever they are now in a much simplified, easy to use form that's on the website.
When we put the audit on the website, we'll make sure that the link for the form, so if we mention a form, self-declaration form, whatever it is, we'll make sure that the link for that form is there in the audit, so it will be a click, hopefully, that will send you then through to the form that you need.
Yeah, so thank you ever so much for joining us tonight and giving up your time and just being so willing and generous with how you're working in our churches, because we know that you're all here as volunteers, and we really appreciate the time and the energies and all the effort you're putting into this to create that safer space and that important culture within our church. So yeah, thank you ever so much for joining us.